Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. I know we have several folks just came straight from the embassy event from 6 to 7, and we're certainly chock full this week of exciting ways, new and creative ways to commemorate and celebrate the Hungarian Revolution of 1956. And I was going to go into a whole spiel in the history, but I see everyone on this call already is familiar with 1956, and I think the basics of why it was so important, not only to the country of Hungary, not only to our Hungarian American community, but obviously to everyone who personally witnessed it or participated in it. So on behalf of the Hungarian American Coalition, welcome to Coalition Kavehaz. We debated about whether or not we should make this kind of a more formal webinar-based meeting. And we decided that we liked the Coalition Kavehaz format because it's a little less formal. Obviously, this is not the time for kave, so if anyone would like to have a little wine, I think I heard Mom say she was already partaking since, you know, it's happy hour time. Oh, Ava, there we go, okay. So please feel free to join in. We are delighted to have two distinguished members of the Hungarian American Coalition, actually founding members, and two 56ers with us to share the story this evening and to really dig into the legacy and the impact of the revolution. As most of you know, this Friday is the 64th anniversary of the beginning of the revolution. As someone who has had the great honor and privilege of interviewing over 130 people who emigrated from Hungary to the United States, I think it's about 70% of them 56ers. I see, and actually I see four people on this call who I've been able to interview thus far. Ciceri Yuri, Vara Yusibachi, my sweet mother, and oh, I thought I saw one other person I had interviewed. Oh, and Voice and Ava. I'm sorry, Ava. So you were hiding behind the wine glass. No, I'm kidding. So thank you again so much for joining us. I'd like to start us out by showing a compilation from the Memory Project. I think most of you all are here with the work that we do in the archive. We have, as I mentioned, 130 interviews, and we are continuing to add to the archive. In fact, this year we've started some Zoom interviews as well, although it's certainly cannot take the place of seeing everyone face to face, and we have wonderful memories of all of those. We do want to make sure that these stories are recorded. So I will go into several of the resources we have that are available. I know there's lots of commemorative events that are planned. I know Cleveland has one on Friday, I think it is. And I know Judith, you have one, is it this weekend in the Carolinas? Yep. And Boston has one. So everyone. Yes,
it's actually tomorrow on Friday.
Tomorrow. Yeah. Okay, sorry, tomorrow. Time, are you still in Budapest or are you back?
Friday.
Friday. Sorry, not Thursday, Friday, yes. Oh, I can't hear you. You're still in Budapest? No, you're in California. Okay.
Yes, I just came back yesterday.
Oh, great. Okay. Wow. Okay.
At the time when you had the meeting, I was landing. Sorry, I couldn't attend yesterday. So, but
that's
I made
okay.
it today. I'm happy to see you guys.
Yeah, Aggie jumped on the call. She said, oh, here we are again. So I don't know what we're going to do tomorrow night. We'll have to come up with another thing. Anyway, okay, let me not get away from the topic of 56 because that's what we're here to talk about and hear about. I want to just briefly start with this Memory Project compilation, and you will see both Edith Lauer, my mother, and Yusibachi as part of the interview. And then I'll do just a very brief bio, and Yusibachi will start us off. We're going to do the Q&A at the end. And then if anyone's interested in staying, depending on what time, how the timing works, we can do a Q&A at the end. And then I also promised a couple folks that we can have a little informal little wine sharing afterwards if anyone would like to stick around and continue to talk about 1956 or any other topic for that matter. So let me begin quickly with the compilation. You didn't need to do that. So these are some of the trailers we have. Oh, there's Bibi Bop. Oh, there's Lucy Bati again. Oh. Okay.
This whole feeling or experience of almost a combustion of desire for freedom, that one day you weren't supposed to do anything, and my parents were constantly warning us not to do anything, and the next day there were hundreds of thousands of people demonstrating on the street. That was unheard of, and of course one had to have the feeling what's going to be the consequence.
But the key point at that meeting was quite late. Must have been easily 8, 9 o'clock, that a stuttering guy, whose name was Balint András, and he was in the same dorm as where I lived on Bartók Béla út, he put up his hand and he asked a question, stuttering. Why are still Soviet troops stationed in his neighbor, what will they react to it? And all of a sudden, in an uncontrolled way, 2,000 people began to chant, Ruski Kaza, Russians go home. And that was, I think, psychologically the moment from which there was no return.
It was our university which started it. I was at the Műegyetem. I was in the first group that walked up to the statue of Bam, and that's where everything started. I had a machine gun, an old Russian machine gun. Didn't do much good against the tanks.
I heard this popping sound, and I thought, geez, there must be guns, and I dropped on the ground immediately. And then a few minutes later, I felt this body fall on top of me, and I had this warm liquid flowing over my face and on my hands. And I turned and happened to be one of my friends who was shot in the head. And I thought to myself, what the hell are you bastards doing?
Volt a könyvtárban egy vörös sarok, ahol fényképek, vörös zászló, szobrok, egyéb minden, azokat elégettük, és a káderlapokat is elégettük az egészet. Levertük a vörös csillagot a bejáratról, és kitűztük a fekete zászlót, mivel hogy 2 kollégánk meghalt előző este.
Valaki azt mondta, hát menjünk a rendőrségre, kérjünk a rendőröktől fegyvert. És a 75-ös végállomásán ott van egy nagy rendőrkaszárnya. Oda mentünk fegyvert kérni. Kis, bolond magyar fiú. Hát, vártak minket a rendőrök, vártak. Minden ablakban volt 2. Töltött fegyverekkel, meg minden, úgyhogy mikor a jó francban, mert itt mi idegesek leszünk. Hát mondtuk, hogy szabadságharcoló, stb. Kell fegyver. Kell fegyver? Kaptuk. Mindjárt. Tűz. Tüzet nyitottak ránk.
What happened was the people from the farms, from the villages, they knew this time because now it's been several days and there was no food supply going on a regular basis to the city. So these guys voluntarily loaded up trucks, like oversized pickup trucks. So I ran down on the street and I don't know what I got, maybe a cabbage, couple of potatoes, I don't know. I was so happy, you know. And he said, yeah, God bless you. That was it. So they didn't want no money.
My husband's best friend, he fought on Senator, and he was caught there, and eventually he was executed.
We named our oldest child after him.
So we actually arrived in Austria on the 1st of December, 1956. That's when I looked back from the border and I saw my Hungary behind me. Sorry, I never wanted to leave.
That was one of our trailers from several years ago from Memory Project. It's an ongoing project, and again, we are so grateful for all of you who have supported and participated in the project. Let me, without further delay, turn this over to Vara Jussi-Bacci to tell us a little bit about what it was like to be a university student at the Technical University in Budapest when the revolution broke out. He fled the country with a group of students arriving in Austria, and he only had one small attaché case with 2 books and his identity papers in it, which is always amazing for me to think that you leave your entire life behind. He ended up in the US and joined the 1956 Student Association led by Litvak Bela, who many of us know from in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And together they formed the National Student Association. He is a graduate of both Harvard and MIT. He has a master's, I didn't know this, Jussi-Bacci. He has a master's in soil mechanics and foundation engineering. And wow. Yeah, and at one point was the president of MEFES, of the Hungarian Student Association in Emigration, and always kept close ties with colleagues from the 1956 student organization. He is also widely published on a number of topics, the subject of the 1956 revolution among them, and the student revolution, the student movement that really sparked it all. And that's what he's going to talk about right now. He is retired, although I don't know that he's doing retirement very well, because he's still he's still active in many ways. Currently lives in Washington, D.C., spends a lot of time in Budapest, and has 3 children. And we're thrilled to have you. Thank you, Jussi-Bacci.
Thank you, Andrea. Look, what I want to talk about is that Hungarian students in the 1956 revolution played a uniquely important role on the path to the outbreak of the revolution. As an eyewitness and a technical university student, as you said, I have the following reflections. Background. The composition of the student body by 1956, because of the admission policy and the social engineering of the communist regime, was more than 50% from very poor, rural and industrial poor families who had all the reason to be friendly to the regime, because it made it possible for them to go to college. They were first college students in their families. And this was very important. And this was the fact. However, in February 1956, in Moscow at the 20th Party Congress, Khrushchev denounced Stalin, all his crimes, the killings, and as a result, the Soviet Party's history obviously had to be reinvented and rewritten. Now, we at that time, all university students were listening to Marxism-Leninism courses. And this subject was the history of the Soviet Communist Bolshevik Party. But it had to be rewritten. So in February, already a month into the spring term, they had to change the curriculum, and we had to take the fifth-year subject of dialectic materialistic philosophy. Oh. Now, this had a shock on many of these students who in some way felt that they owed something to them because the regime, the new communist government brought them into the university. And this was a shock, and their trust in the system was deeply shaken. Now, what happened in 1956 before October? Well, there were more and more debates among students in dormitories, in improvised groups, what have you. The initial focus was mainly on arrangements for the supporting of students and the benefits for students, what conditions were in the dormitories, how was the food, the transport, access to sports and culture, all kinds of things. The impact, however, of the obligatory military studies already called the attention and led to the questioning of the curriculum, which of course had the compulsory Russian language, Marxism, Leninism, military studies for everyone, whatever profession, whatever school you were in. So suddenly they also began to talk about travel abroad, at least to the neighboring so-called socialist countries, but the passports were unavailable. So they raised the question, when are we going to get passports so that we can travel more freely? And then the Petrofi Circle, which was a reform communist debate forum, also called the attention. There are a lot of people going there and many students also, because they also began to discuss political reforms, but not fundamental political reforms, but nonetheless, political reforms were on the agenda. Now, as the summer came, in 1956, all students went home. So the dorms became empty. There were no groups of students together, and there was a lull in the process of warming up to some important events. And in September, all students were back in the dormitories. In all university cities, that meant large group of students together, and including, of course, Budapest. But there was another very important town, Szeged. On the 6th of October, in this process, the Communist Party arranged for the reburial of László Rajk, who was a famous communist killed by the Hungarian Stalinists in 1949. And of course, when they got together in the cemetery on Kerepesi út, they, of course, made all kinds of commitments and vows. Never again shall we ever kill our comrades. Well, they knew little, how little they had to wait for that to happen again. And at that burial, or after the burial, there were the first public demonstrations and marches on the streets in Budapest. This led to increased questioning of the legitimacy of the system, even in the eyes of those students who were beneficiaries the regime. Now, the party's youth organization, this began to worry very much because they were worried that they were going to lose control. Now, in the October days, frequent meetings went on in the dorms, hot debates on all issues, and the Petőfi Circle debates became more and more popular. People were flooding the streets, still listening to loudspeakers. A new weekly was launched, Hétfői Hírlap, which you had to wait. People lined up at kiosks in order to get it, hoping to get one of the papers. And the university newspapers, because every university had a newspaper, there also they began to talk more freely and a little bit more daringly about topics, politics, not only narrowly and strictly student affairs. And then there were large meetings, not just small gatherings, but large meetings. One of them on the 16th of October in Szeged was one of the most important ones. There, for the first time, the question was raised, why are Russian troops still in Hungary? And they also re-established MEFES, which was a democratic student organization killed by the communists in 1948. But these events of Szeged did not spread as news across the country. I didn't hear it. When we went on to our meeting on the 22nd of October, I didn't know about the Szeged meeting of 16th of October. However, there were two delegates from Szeged, and they, of course, wanted to speak. We all wanted them to speak, but this leadership tried to block it. There were scuffles, and then the mass meeting sort of desire prevailed, and at that point, the Communist Party establishment of the university, the Marxism-Leninism department, and this leadership left the aula of the university. Interestingly and importantly, the military department remained in the building. So a marathon meeting then began, where we also founded MEFES again, and you heard from the memory project that is when this question was raised openly. Why are Russian troops still in Hungary? And then 2,000 people began to chant Ruskik Haza. This, as I mentioned in the memory project, I think this was the psychological moment from which there was no return. So during this long meeting that went up beyond midnight, the 14 points were drafted with radicalized demands. Soviet troops should leave the country, free multi-party elections, independence, and the next day a sympathy demonstration with Poland. So we will go to General Bem's statue, who was a Polish general, a hero of the 1848 Hungarian freedom fight. And we did this because in the summer in Poznan, there were fights and dead people. So next day, October 23rd, the party and the government suspends the march to the Bem statue. They said no. Delegations from all universities went to party and government centers and headquarters. And in the end, they were obliged to lift the ban. Now, demonstrations spread in town, And the sound system, just like here now, was not very good at the BAM statue at all. So people were unhappy. We wanted to hear more. And so many people, thousands, went to the parliament where Nagyimra showed up, but he didn't really satisfy the people. First he addressed us as comrades, then we said "Fui, fui," and then he said, "Oh, fellow countrymen," and then things were a little bit better. But he didn't say anything significant. So everybody said, "Let's go to the radio station and have the 14 points broadcast." By the time we got there, we never even made it to the radio station on Brody Sándor utca, because some other students were already there with the 14 points, and they were demanding the broadcast. The Secret Service guards at the radio, their answer was bullets. They began to shoot, and a girl died right there. So right after this, the heavy and intense fighting ensued, and practically immediately, and spread in the town. At the same time, the workers already tumbled the Stalin statue out on the Városmajor, so that actually the revolution was born, broke out, and I am convinced that the way it happened was because of the radical arguments and the radical demands of the university students. That's it.
Very interesting. Fascinating.
I hope that some of the specifics I mentioned will lead to some good questions that we can discuss.
Absolutely. Was really fascinating. We talk about 56, but never in that detail about the student movement. So thank you for sharing that. We'll have some opportunity for questions after the next presentation. I'll give, it's a little bit difficult to introduce one's mother. So, so I looked for many different bios to try to come at it from all the right perspectives. So I'll just kind of put a few things together that I found. So I'll refer to her as Edith Lauer from this point on. So it's more formal. So Edith Kish-Lauer serves as the chair emerita of the Hungarian American Coalition, which is the organization she helped found in 1990, and of which, just in the interest of full disclosure, that I'm now the president of, but and Mom was the president of way back at the beginning. So it's a very interesting kind of coming full circle. But at the age of 14, Edith Kish-Lauer witnessed the revolution from her family's balcony overlooking Morizsi-Munkörtér. Her entire family was involved in the revolution. Her mother worked in the Patika, the local pharmacy, helping wounded freedom fighters on the square. Her older sister and she helped deliver messages across the square and gathered supplies from the pharmacy to help classmates make Molotov cocktails. Her father and she worked side by side building barricades from the cobblestone streets, all at the age of 14. And then the entire family escaped in 2 waves in November 1956 and were reunited in Vienna and made their way to the US. My mom eventually married a Tista Amerikai gentleman who I say a pure American because he was from so many different ethnic backgrounds. And she is obviously a very proud Hungarian and very enthusiastic American and has passed that on to me. Currently, Mom is, in addition to being on the Hungarian American Coalition, she serves on the board of the Victims of Communism Foundation and the Hungary Initiatives Foundation. And she's had a long and storied career over the past 30 years, running various programs and organizations in the Hungarian American community. So thanks for joining us this evening, Mom, Mrs. Lauer. And,
yeah.
if you could share your insights on the legacy and impact of the revolution.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Rice. Jussi, thanks. That was a wonderful lecture. I'm so fascinated to learn the specifics of what you related because I had never heard it quite that way. And I'm immediately brought back. You said that you lived on Bartók Béla út, and of course we lived on Verpeléti út, which today is Karinti Frigyes utca and Körtér. So you and I must have passed by each other many a time.
Yes, yes, yes.
Before the revolution, it's Somogyi Balázs and a whole lot of other people also.
Surely.
Bartók Béla út. My remarks, you know, when I think back to celebrating commemorating the 1956 revolution, I remember probably at least 20 to 25 occasions on which I was asked to speak, and different places, different times. One of the very first ones was in Cleveland, then in Florida, in Sarasota, Florida, and Chicago when Shashmartzi asked me to speak to the Hungarian club, and in Boston a few years after that, as well as in many other places. Today, what I decided to talk about was what direct effect, unexpected effect, the Hungarian Revolution had on the founding and the development of the Hungarian American Coalition. After all, that's what we are about here. So here are my thoughts, the legacy of the Hungarian Revolution. In a few days, we will mark the 64th anniversary of the Hungarian Revolution, an unforgettable event that almost succeeded in changing the course of history in 1956. While it might not have changed history then, it certainly changed many lives, foremost among those the lives of thousands of Hungarian families and individuals who left Hungary and escaped to the West. It is generally an accepted opinion that the revolution was defeated when on November 4th, 1956, the Soviets re-entered and occupied Hungary by overwhelming force. But today, I would like to remind ourselves that in fact, the revolution produced a major victory. Hungary showed the world for the first time the true and evil face of communism. As a result, communism was widely discredited. The communist parties of England, France, and Italy, and the United States were decimated as thousands of their members finally recognized that Soviet propaganda was nothing more than a cruel hoax, a philosophy that nobody who believed in freedom could support. There is yet another rarely mentioned, unexpectedly positive outcome. We can call it the unintended consequence of the revolution. And that is the reinvigoration of Hungarian communities in the Western world. While undeniably the escape of 200,000 Hungarians after the revolution was a tragic loss of a nation, for a nation of only 10 million people, at the same time, it provided a unique large wave of deeply committed, highly qualified Hungarians to communities all over the world. From Western Europe to Australia, from Canada to South Africa, these Hungarians started a new life far away from their home. We know that 35,000 of these refugees, the so-called freedom fighter generation, ended up in the United States, many choosing to settle in already existing Hungarian American communities. These were established by the Öreg Amerikások, who came at the turn of the century, or the displaced persons who left Hungary after World War II to arrive in the US only 4 to 5 years prior to 1956. Thus, the Hungarian communities of Ohio, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, California, and elsewhere were unexpectedly revitalized through the energy of this new wave of refugees. Because they had suffered through 8 years of communist rule and the revolution in Hungary, Many of them felt it was their mission to keep the spirit of Hungarian freedom alive during the continued Soviet domination of their homeland. They formed organizations, they established or strengthened already existing churches, clubs, weekend schools. They published books and newspapers. They joined the Hungarian Scout movement. Beginning in the 1980s, they traveled to still communist Hungary, as well as to the Hungarian communities in the neighboring countries, and established important contacts there, gaining firsthand knowledge of the facts on the ground and relaying credible information to US policymakers. In 1989, with Hungarian help, the Berlin Wall fell. Communism finally collapsed in Hungary and most of East Central Europe. Soon thereafter, when we founded the Hungarian American Coalition in 1991, our goal was to unite and institutionalize all of the efforts I mentioned above of Hungarian American organizations and individuals to assist Hungary in becoming a free democratic society. In the nearly 30 years since our founding, we have witnessed the commitment and energy of many outstanding Hungarian Americans from all over the US. Our activities have included support for the democratic and economic development of Hungary, cultural and educational exchanges between the US and Hungary, protecting and promoting the human and minority rights of Hungarians, and promoting interest in the US for Hungarian history and culture. Between 1993 and 1998, we worked tirelessly to make sure Hungary would become a member of NATO. Let's see what role the 56er generation had in these efforts. A large number participated in the founding of the coalition. Paul Fekete, Father István Mustos, Professor Péter Pásztor, Dr. Balázs Somogyi, Bishop Zoltán Szűcs, Sándor Tarabcovics, Péter Újvági, and myself. Many of you participating in this program tonight are members of this group as well. Just look at the list of 56ers who are or have been coalition board members in the past. László Böjtös, George Dózsa, Ágnes and László Fülöp, István Füzesi, Miklós Kolumbán, Les Megyeri, Jenő Megyesi, Károly Nagy, László Pap, Paul Ruprecht, Helen Szabja, Charles Vámosi, and Eva Voisin. Please excuse me if I neglected to mention anyone, but I hope that I have the list complete. At the risk of being immodest, I think all of us can be proud of the contributions made by many Hungarian Americans, including the 56th generation in the 30 years since the fall of communism. As László Dobos, the Hungarian politician and writer, and my dear and beloved mentor for many years, said so eloquently when we marked the 50th anniversary of 1956 in Pozsony, quote, "This generation took with it a hate and fear of dictatorship and violence, a deep sense of patriotism, the acceptance of responsibility for its homeland, and an abiding desire for freedom. Even at great geographical distance, it paid close attention to the fate of its homeland. It helped the opposition forces organize. Its members became acting diplomats who were appointed on moral grounds. This generation of Hungarian 56ers in America, with its behavior, institutions, and intellectual values, represents the outstanding achievement of our modern day Hungarian history." Thanks for listening to some of my thoughts on the 64th anniversary of 1956. I consider it a great gift in my and of all of our life that for the last few decades, we have had the privilege of being close observers of history. And I would like to think that in a small way, we may even have managed to contribute to it. Thank you.
Very good.
Great. Thank you so much, Mom. The other, Mom and I were talking earlier, this morning, and one of the interesting things that we talked about is not only the incredible impact 1956 has had on our own community, but also that it's had such a fascinating impact on people outside of our community. And we went through a number of folks who I'll let you all look into these stories on your own. But what was the list we came up with? Elvis Presley.
Elvis Presley, yes.
Pat Buchanan, who in his Catholic school said a prayer to Cardinal Mindszenty every day when his picture was above the door. Elvis Presley, I think, was fundraising at all of his concerts for the freedom fighters.
And dedicated songs to the Hungarian freedom fighters.
Right.
And John Whitehead, whom we honored as one of the coalition honorees.
John Whitehead, who helped rebuild New York City after 9/11. He was a partner at Goldman Sachs when he first came on vacation in Vienna, when he came face to face with his first freedom fighter. And he was so moved by the story, he cut the vacation short, flew home, spent 2 days on the phone as a newly minted partner at Goldman Sachs, and fundraising and also gathering supplies. So he got rubber boats and motors and medical supplies, even ammunition.
Communication radio.
He called up Pan Am, had them book him a flight, and he flew back to Vienna with all the supplies and loaded them up in a boat, and his friend took him down the river to the freedom fighters. So, I mean, these are just
there are all kinds of neat stories.
Yeah. So anyway.
Phyllis Schlafly, also the Catholic connection, remember?
Right. Phyllis
She
Schlafly
founded the Cardinal Mindszenty Foundation.
Right. So these are just a handful. I'm sure there are many, many more, but I'm happy to open the call up if anyone has questions for Yusibachi or Mom, or if anyone wants to share any other reflections on 1956. I'm happy to take questions.
Yusibachi, if I may call you that, can I ask something real quick?
Pardon?
Can I ask a question real quick?
Of course.
Great. So my name is Judith Trunkus, and I live in South Carolina. And as I was listening to your presentation, you mentioned the 14 points, and you mentioned that, if I didn't misunderstand it, that you felt it was it was a little too much. Do you think that if the 14 points were maybe more moderate, do you think that would have triggered a different response from Khrushchev?
I think, knowing how the Soviet dictatorship and satellite countries were run at the time, this was an extremely radicalized set of demands. Namely, think of it, we not only asked the Soviet troops to leave Hungary, but we asked them for multi-party elections, which is an anathema to the one-party dictatorship system. I mean, to the one-party system. So that was their existential, basis that we questioned with this, and then that they want to be independent. That meant, by implication, that we want to leave the Warsaw Pact, which was created in 1955. In a way, they wanted to, the Soviets wanted to counterbalance NATO. They wanted to have their own military arrangement. So our questions went to the very fundamental tenets of communist dictatorship. So I think that this, in a way, made it very difficult for them to begin to try to work through compromises. They probably had it in their mind, but there was no way, because once the students got to that point that they made these statements, and this was distributed all over town. Just to let you know, when I took a bus, 23rd in the morning on Bartók Béla út, the conductor, not the conductor, but the fellow who was controlling the tickets, He was saying, don't pay me, just give me a copy of the 14 points. This is the kind of popularity that this set of demands arrives in Hungary, among Hungarians also. So you can imagine what it meant in party headquarters next to the parliament. So I think it was this radicalized demand that really changed fundamentally everything. I lived there, and I never remember since 1945 until 1956, October 22, ever in public, the question raised that Soviet troops, why are they here? They should be leaving Hungary.
May I make a comment also?
Sure, of course.
Jussi, I found your comment extremely interesting, that the university students that you're talking about at the university in 1956 had already been selected, because remember the Kitalapites, the 10,000, 12,000 families that were discredited and sent out to the countryside with only a suitcase of goods. That happened in 1951 and 1952. So the children of those people, they were my cousins, who to this day tell me about that, how that happened and how they knew they could never attend university in Hungary. So the selected students that you're talking about in 1956 did not include any of the so-called higher class, upper class, reactionary, etc.
No, they did not. You're right on that. They did not.
That's fascinating. Yeah. That's
no, they did not. But don't forget one thing. Of course, the deported people had to be in Budakeszi and couldn't even live in Budapest.
Yes.
And when Imre Nagy in 1953 closed the deportation. But the important thing is that look, I remember these guys when I showed up in 1955 in September as a freshman. And I saw all these guys with these big leather coats. And, these were all the faithful communist students. And many of them were quite enthusiastic about what was happening around them. But all those people, and I know them by name and by person, in 1956, they were on the side of the revolution. Because the de-Stalinization and the hollow lies of the party that came through after this Stalinization just did not wash any longer.
Judith, I'd like to tell you that your question is one of the most crucial, basic questions about analyzing the revolution. And that is, what would have happened if the demands had been less extreme? But my answer, I'm no revolutionary expert, mind you, but I do have some experience here. My answer is, I've never heard of a revolution that when it went 2/3 of the way, people said, oh, let's stop here, let's not upset the others, we're not gonna ask for anything else.
Right.
So,
and that's a reform. And this
no, but I didn't say that. If what I said implied that I think.
I didn't mean it to you. I meant that to Judith's question, that I've often read that commentary. What if the demands had not been as aggressive?
Oh, I see. Well,
they had stopped? Yes, that's what
I'll ask any historian, and they will tell you the counterfactual is always a very, very tough topic to deal with, because we don't know. But
we don't know.
I frankly think that in the case of the story of the students, I think they really uniquely contributed to the flare-up with their attitude. Now, if it would have happened in any way, most probably in different form later, what have you, but that at that time there were widespread fights in Budapest. That was a major thing. And of course, interestingly enough, you don't find university students in large numbers among the fighters, especially later.
Yes.
You don't find them.
They were from the working class, yes.
We became, I was a member of the National Guard because of submachine gun and everything else. But when November 4 came, most of us, many of us, did not go out to the Móri Zsigmond Körtér to shoot.
I was watching.
Let me add something that I think connects my generation to the 56 revolution is I actually remember one of the results of the 56 revolution, which was the actual leaving of the last Soviet soldier. I was actually in Hungary. I lived in Domjanic utca. And I remember in the news when the poor guy, the last soldier, was jumping up the train.
Got on the train. Yes.
And that is a direct result of what happened in 56.
Yes.
So this is a beautiful connection.
Yes, it is.
It is.
And
Eva,
then, you know, we haven't said, just one more comment on this topic, that we haven't said anything about the influence of Tito, of Yugoslavia. That was really encouraging the Soviets to clamp down. He was afraid that if Hungary loosened the yokes, the Soviet yokes, the same thing would be demanded in Yugoslavia, etc. There is a fabulous book, very, very thick book that contains the pretty recently revealed correspondence from the Soviet authorities to the Hungarian Revolutionary Committee and to Nagy Imre and to Rákosi and to everybody, and it's very, very fascinating, depressing, scary reading that they played with the idea, but for a very short time, of letting Hungary go, but then number one, because of their own desire for domination, and certainly assisted by the other communist countries, foremost among them Tito, they then totally rejected accepting any kind of demands.
Speaking of Belgrade, I'm glad you mentioned just a small vignette that the Hungarian leadership, all of the Politburo, went to Belgrade for several days. And they returned to Budapest in the morning of October 23rd. And so they just got into their offices when this whole idea of the demand of the marches and the demonstrations and all that. So obviously they were there to like Konoszavara járták, meaning that they were trying to get back into the good graces of the Tito leadership. And as you say, Tito later was extremely influential. I think on the 31st of October, talking with Khrushchev in the Brioni Island, and they decided that we must not let this continue.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Fascinating. I just wanted to ask Eva Voisin, who's our other 56er on the call this evening. Do you have anything you'd like to add to the comments that have been made?
Sure.
I hate to put you on the spot.
No, it's perfectly okay. It's quite vivid in my mind. I'm a little bit, tiny bit younger than Edith, so I remember everything. Actually, similar story in Budapest. And we actually didn't leave until January 158 because my parents were vacillating back and forth. But when I first went back to Hungary in 1968, and I've been going back regularly ever since, I remembered so well everything, I didn't even need a map. So there are certain things, and it's certainly one of those events that marks your childhood, and you do remember it. And to Judith and her generation, I just want to say that ever since, so often I've gone back, but I've never gone back on October 23. For one thing, since 1990, I've been very involved in Hungarian American events. And so I always had to be in the United States for the 23rd commemoration. But in 2000, for the 60th anniversary, I was back. And it was the most amazing event, remembrance in Hungary. And it included everything from the university, a march from the university to the Bem Square, across the bridge. And they actually had young students from the acting school dressed in 1956 clothes. And they had reprinted the newspapers from 56 and from 22 or 24, and they were handing them out everywhere on the corners and at buses and streetcars, etc. So it was really amazing. You would also carry the candles, and they had even the trucks from 1956.
I was just going to say they had the trucks, the time.
Yes, and some people, of course, went on the truck and went over. Paul and I went on foot, but that was, and then of course it was a 4 or 5 day of events all over, from museums to the parliament to whatever. So that, of course, that was the 60th. So it's probably not like that every year, but I don't know what year you came with it, but it's certainly a very interesting souvenir, and I'm just so glad that I had a chance to share that. I did want to say a couple of other things. To your list of celebrities, you can add former Governor Schwarzenegger, because every time I saw him, he would remember that I was the Hungarian girl, and he remembers feeding us when he was a young child. His father, his father was the mayor of, I don't remember if it's Graz or Linz, but, and so he remembers that as a child he went and they helped to cook the Hungarian refugees and fed them. So I thought that was very touching. Of course, since then he's become persona non grata, but that's a different issue. Then I had a question to Jussi. What does MEFE stand for? Magyar Egyetemista
és Főiskolások Egyesült Szövetsége. Magyar egyetemisták és főiskolások Egyesült Szövetsége.
And was that allowed to function after November 4th, or?
Well, they were talking. They were here and there making statements or printing leaflets and stuff like that. But it was not significant yet. They allowed it to function until April 1957.
Oh, okay.
The MEFE, and then they just closed it, and then came the new youth organization of the party, which was called KISS. KISS instead of this.
Kommunista Ifjúsági Szövetség. Yeah. Kommunista Ifjúsági Szövetség.
Correct. Yeah.
As far as my personal comment about, this question, had the demands been less radical, I believe that they were still at a stage where absolutely no opposition was tolerated. So at least I've been reading a lot, not just, since I grew up, but under COVID, I'm reviewing my library, and it's amazing how many books there are on the subject. And one of the most interesting I found was, I didn't even know I had the communiques that the British ambassador sent to London from the 23rd all the way to, and that's a new perspective. But there are many books that if you're interested, the other is the United Nations. I think there's a publication too. So hopefully all that is going to be online when everything is digitalized, right? Andrea?
Right, yeah. Well, I can say I do want to wrap up quickly, because I know we're a little bit past time, but one story for anyone who might not be aware, we have set up a series of working groups with the Magyar Diaspora Tanács, the Hungarian Diaspora Council committee, and one of them is on Hungarian heritage and history. And we're trying to determine what to do with all of these archival bits of information and ephemera. This is my new word for the process now that I've learned, to determine how to digitize, how to make these things accessible, how to find perhaps one university relationship that we can build on. For example, we're looking at the American Hungarian Foundation and their relationship right now with Rutgers. Melissa Kotko-Pepin was on the Diaspora Tanács call yesterday, the community call. She just sent 3 million documents back to Hungary to be digitized, complete with metadata, so everything will be searchable. So there's a great opportunity for the archive of our heritage and history. And just the comments online right now about 56, I'm trying to get involved in all the conversations that I can, point people towards Memory Project, point people towards different resources that are out there. And I mean, just this morning, or just this afternoon before I jumped on the call, I was in a conversation with a lady from Houston who has, she claims every single commendation or official documentation that has been issued for 56ers by any American governmental representative. So, I mean, that's incredible. We need to make sure that those kinds of artifacts are saved and archived and made accessible to people. When we go in and we talk to people from Memory Project, if we have a great, you know, experience with them, and it's usually a wonderful bonding experience. I don't know, maybe Ava and George and everyone can tell me, but people will, you know, say, oh, come with me because, you know, underneath my bed, I have this photo album, or, oh, I want you to see, this is an original 16 points. I guess it was eventually 16 points, you know, that's up on our wall. So, I mean, people have incredible documents and archive and artifacts that they brought with them. And so we want to make sure that those things are saved. In addition to that, I just took a trip just a couple of weeks ago to Bethlehem Communities in Ligonier, Pennsylvania. And among the 4 rooms filled with information from the floor to the ceiling, one small box I found was from Chasar Edeba. I don't know how many of you all remember Chasar Edeba. He created this unbelievable box. I think it was 1957. And it is all hand labeled. And I mean, with the most meticulous care. He has documents, original documents that I had never seen of incredible materials. Everything from a black book that listed everyone who was executed or imprisoned during the Kadar regime. Every Hungarian radio broadcast translated, every, I don't know, I could go on and on, but all of these things were alphabetized, put in chronological order, personally labeled. I mean, it was beautiful. So I think there are treasures like this all across our community. So everyone just needs to keep their eyes open for them. And we then need to figure out a way, a kind of a process to go through to make sure that we can all archive them and make sure that they're saved and they're accessible for everyone in the community. So that's what our goal is finding a location where we can find a location and fund a location where there's an actual physical collection, but then digitize as much of that as possible to make it available community-wide. So that's one of the big projects, and I'm actually going to be proposing that to Potapi Arpad on Monday, along with all of the Hungarian Diaspora Tanács representatives. That's going to be a big call. So 2 quick things before we go. This book, 56 Stories, my mother and I did for the 50th anniversary. My Lord, it seems so long ago. This is available for download online, so there's no payment involved, but it's got all sorts of stories. It's also got original drawings and pictures. For kids, the Hungarian Freedom Fighter of 56. This is also a free download. It's a graphic novel. I made it for my kids, and thankfully, we always read it around this time of year. And then for anyone who's having a commemorative event where there will be 2nd generation, 3rd generation kids, we did this downloadable booklet. It's an educational booklet that's filled with games and mazes and code breaking and stuff like that. But I partnered with Piroska Nagy Karcsi's daughter, who's a teacher at the American School in Budapest. And so we did it together. So it's actually an educational tool as well as being hopefully fun. So this is also downloadable for free. So if there are commemorative events in the future and you all have any use for those, please remember those. And memory project trailers, you don't have to pay for any of it. We just want to make sure that the story and the spirit of the revolution is never forgotten and forever shared. Last bit of housekeeping, please put on your calendar December 4th for the Hungarian American Coalition first ever virtual Mikuláš Gala, December 4th from 6 p.m. to 7:30. We will hopefully have remarks from the new ambassador, but we'll see if that actually happens. We're hoping he'll be here by then. We'll have
He's coming, I heard.
Sorry?
I heard he's on his way. He's arriving within days.
He is, but we can't have an official announcement of that until he presents his credentials. So that'll just be between the 16 of us. So okay. And then we have a performance from Kalaka, and we'll be highlighting several of our wonderful interns and scholarship recipients from our 3 educational projects. So I hope you all will join us. I know several other people on the call have 56 events and everything else. I'm trying to share everything from the community on the MDT Amerikai Elnök Facebook page. Please go there for further information. And one more time, Vároly Jussi and Edith Kishlauer / my mother, thank you so much for your wonderful comments. Ava, thank you for sharing your recollections, and thank you everybody for spending a little bit of your Wednesday evening with us. October 23rd is right around the corner, and next year, Ava, the 65th anniversary next year. I don't know what it's gonna hold, but we're really looking for community-wide projects. So let's put our heads together and figure out what we can do to make that super memorable as well.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you, Jussi. Bye.
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 And thank you so much. This was very, very informative.
Oh,
and,
good. Thanks, George.
The stories just won't quit.
I know. 64 years after. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Well, I even got some of my own from 1989.
Yeah, when you
Gaze,
have Gaze
and I were, that's where we met. And
yes, I remember. Yes.
So,
I see
so
Sandy over your shoulder there, George. Hi, Sandy.
Oh yeah, she's right there in the background. Okay.
All right, thanks for joining, Zolfi and Irene. Appreciate you guys being here. Clarice,
Bye,
thanks for being
everybody.
here.
Bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.